I joined the march because the world had run out of places to hide. They burned our fields and salted the wells and left the sheep wandering without eyes. The old men said we should stay in the cellar and pray. The young men said we should run to the forests and learn to eat bark. My sister wrapped her hair in a red ribbon and walked to the church steps and said, "If God will not look for us, we will look for him in the smoke." I signed my name on a cracked board with a charcoal nub and became a pilgrim. They shaved our scalps in a courtyard that used to be a market. They gave us canvas coats that smelled of tallow and grave dirt. They nailed bronze medals onto our collars, saints I could not name, saints with cracked faces and iron halos, and told us not to take them off, even to sleep. A castigator walked the line with a ledger under his arm and a switch in his fist. He looked at our feet, our hands, our mouths, and made marks with neat little ticks, like a shopkeeper counting loaves. "Pilgrims," he said without looking up, "are not soldiers. You are offerings." He smiled, but only with his teeth. At the end of the yard, beneath a web of cords strung with damp laundry and prayer flags, stood the prophetess. She was narrow as a starved birch, gray hair tangled, the sockets under her eyes stained with old tears that never dried. She held a rusted sword over her shoulder like a shepherd's crook. Little bells were stitched to her sleeves, and when she breathed, they rang. "Children," she told us, "you have been seen." We looked up, because even the word seen had weight. I had not been seen, not properly, for years, not by the conscripts, not by the merchants in the last town that still had window glass, not by the sky. She put the tip of the blade to the mud, and it hissed. Steam rose around her ankles like the breath of an invisible ox. She said she had seen a gate of bone, yawning at dawn. She said she had seen a lamb in ash. She said she had seen us most of all, moving through the smoke like beads, sliding through a rosary, each of us with a number on our tongues, and the nail holes already marked. We bowed our heads. We crossed ourselves with dirty thumbs. The castigators clapped their switches to our backs, and we began to march. The road out of the town was a corridor of broken things, door frames without doors, fences without fields, a schoolhouse with a chalk problem still on the board, long division, the remainders skittering down like pale flies. We passed men in uniform who were not allowed to meet our eyes. They leaned in their trench bays and chewed hard biscuit and watched us through their brows as if we were a weather change at a checkpoint where a truck had stalled forever with its hood up. A priest in a tin collar sprinkled us with brackish water. "God favors the eager," he said. Then he looked at the castigator and corrected himself. "God has favored you already." We carried pikes made of broom handles and poles scavenged from fences. We carried icons drawn in soot on sackcloth. A woman with the seamstress hands kept tugging at our cuffs so they would not catch on wire. A boy with lash marks like tidy stitches across his shoulder blades, chimney work or worse, walked close enough that I could feel the fever licking off him. He had lost his eyebrows to some chemical thing, and his face looked surprised by everything, even breathing. Behind us, the yard where they had shaved our heads became a sketch in the fog. Ahead, the fog became a yard where someone else would be shaved and counted. We learned our new steps. You do not take ordinary steps into no man's land. You pick your feet up as if the ground were a sleeping dog. You set them down as if the dog has a name, and you do not call it. The air thickened and then thinned until you had to choose between swallowing and breathing. The sky lost its edges and sank down over the wire. At dusk, we found the first of the stakes. hammered into the clay, at angles like broken ribs. Every 10th stake had a rag tied to it, and every rag was stiff. The men in uniform did not put rags on their stakes. The men in uniform had lamps, and those lamps were red. Do not stray, the castigator said. We are many, only if we stay many. The prophetess raised her sword, as if it weighed nothing, and pointed to a line of hump-backed ruins on the horizon. There, she said, though the word was softer than the bells, there is the chapel. We will sleep under Saint's breath, and in the morning the wound will open. We passed an aid dugout, where a medic turned a hand crank to charge a lamp. In the lamplight lay a man whose legs had been exchanged for 2 neat bundles of bandage, crossed like loaves. The medic nodded at us, as if we were rain finally arriving. Pilgrims, he said, without judgment. He touched 2 fingers to the medals at my collar, not to bless me, but to feel the cold. Keep them, he said. Metal remembers. The trenchmen watched us go. One took off his hat, then remembered he was supposed to look away, and stared instead at his own hands. In those hands I saw the same black line embedded under the nails that I carried myself. I wanted, badly, and for no reason, to ask him if the line ever went away. Night came down in pieces. At first it was only deeper weather, then it was a lid clapped over the world, then it was a presence, something with a slow pulse, something that could hear us. We reached the chapel. Once it had been a stone thing with a bell tower and a little square steeple like a finger pointing up to where good answers lived. Now the steeple lay on its side, and the bell was a torpedo-shaped carcass wrapped in metal wire, and the nave had no roof. The icon on the back wall had been sanded back to gray, and then burned black, and then washed rain white again. The only color left was the slow oil sheen of dampness. We pushed together inside the broken ribs of the building and learned each other's backs. Someone laughed, a little too far along the edge of things, and someone else said the laughing one's name, like a scolded child. I curled under what once had been a pew, and what now was only a plank with a nail through it. I tucked my feet up, because the mud will steal anything left loose. The prophetess walked among us with a cup of boiled water. She was not the one who boiled it. The water had the taste of fingers. Still she made a circle, and when she stopped her bells stopped too, and the room felt smaller. She pressed her palm over the cup and said, a psalm I did not know. The surface of the water did not ripple. I stared into it and saw my face for the first time in a season. It was not the face I had been born to. It was a face soldered out of scraps, a face without a house. Sleep, Isadora said. The saints are passing. Listen to their boots. I tried to sleep, but sleep would not take me by the wrist. Instead I lay and counted the spaces between the artillery, like a child learning to skip. Far away, the guns argued with the ground in a language older than rain. Closer by there were smaller conversations, spades, worms, the teeth of men, clacking against mess tin rims. Someone whispered a story about a boy who had been resurrected without a tongue and without a shadow, and had nevertheless sung. Someone else said not to say the word resurrected out loud unless you were prepared to pay for what you asked for. A wind moved through the chapel without moving the air. The candle stubs set into the cracked mortar burned lower, but did not gutter. The wax slumped into clean deltas. I walked the perimeter to warm my feet, and found a soot handprint low on the wall beside the door, small as a sparrow. It was not recent. The soot had polished to a sheen under many fingertips. I put my hand over it, and it did not fit. A castigator was there without footsteps. Don't go far, he said, and it was the voice of the earlier one or another one wearing the same voice. "I'm just learning the dark," I told him. "The dark has learned you," he said, and the switch in his hand ticked against his boot. "Back in with the saints." We were not saints. We were the reason saints had to exist at all. Still, the night thinned around a sound like leather soles going past on stone somewhere that was not here. The prophetess lifted her head, as if listening to rain in the rafters that were no longer there. "They are tallying," she said to no one. "They are not counting teeth. They are counting hinges." The chimney boy curled against my back, as if we had been born together. The seamstress made tiny knots in a strip of torn banner and toggled them with her thumbnail, as if to tether dawn. The man who had never told me his name breathed each breath like a polite apology. Just before dawn, the prophetess fell. There were no theatrics to it. One moment she stood with her sword over her shoulder and the bells ringing. The next, her legs went out from beneath her, and she folded the way a bundle of sticks folds when the twine rots. The cup she had been holding rolled in a half circle and came to rest by the soot handprint as if it had been there before. No one screamed. No one rushed forward. We had already learned the lesson that the first person to rush forward is the first person to be punished by a stray thing called fate. Isidora lay on her side. Her eyes were open. Her pupils were the size of pinheads, then the size of coins, then something in between, as if the light in the world had forgot how to be measured. A thread of something thin and bright was coming from one nostril, pulling itself down to her lip as neatly as a silk line drawn from a seamstress's spool. "The saint," she breathed. "He is taller than I thought." We did not ask which one. There are saints the way there are stars, enough that you will never run out, and always one missing. "His bones are singing," she said. "They are singing inside themselves. He is not where he belongs. He is not at rest. He asks. He asks. The bells on her sleeve flickered, then went still. The castigator knelt and touched her throat. He did it with the sort of respect a man gives to a blade before he swallows it. "She is not dead," he announced. "She is in council." We waited, because waiting is the only thing that does not require instruction. The dawn did not arrive so much as it took off its shoes and slipped in around our ankles. There is a kind of light that belongs to factories, and a kind that belongs to fields, and a kind that belongs to altars. This light belonged to hospitals. It looked at each of us and counted our ribs. The prophetess sat up without using her hands. "There is a gate," she said, as if she were continuing an argument from yesterday. "There is a gate, and it is made of interlocked ribs. There is a lock, and it is a skull wearing a crown that is not a crown. There is a watchman who lost his eyes, and they replaced them with coins, and he can see better now. There is a key, and it is a lamb's tongue, and it is given to us." She lifted the rusted sword. The sword had no edge left. The sword had never killed anyone who did not want to be killed. Still, we all felt taller as the blade rose. "You will follow me," she said. "We will pass the watchman by saying his true name. I have it here." She touched her chest with her free hand. "And we will go through the rib gate into the trench that is not on any map." We raised our banners. They were not embroidered. They were sheets, stitched back together from flour sacks and shroud linen. On them we had scrawled names we loved with the soot of cooking fires and the ink of berries that did not grow anymore. We lifted the poles. The poles were broom handles, pike shafts where the steel had been melted down to make star nails, lengths of stripped fence, We raised them like we were raising a roof. The castigator stood and cleared his throat in a manner that wanted to be a prayer and could not find the words. "Pilgrims," he said, "the prophetess has spoken. Form into the ranks, the saints prefer. Banners raised, no talking." His switch tapped ankles, not to hurt, but to place. The first wire bit through the flags, and then our coats, and then our skin. And we kept walking. We were not saints. We were offerings. Offerings do not keep count of cuts. Bullets made lines through the fog, and the lines were chalk at first, and then they were needles, and then they were something slower and uglier, like hooks. The men in uniform shouted without words. Their mouths hung open by the springs in their cheeks. Their eyes rolled upward to show the whites, and the tiny red forks in the corners. The castigator did not shout. He walked in the trough between the files, and tapped his switch against ankles. The prophetess led, though I do not know how she found space for her feet in all that iron. We came to the first ditch. It was filled with water that was not water. I could see my face in it again, and this time the face was made of rope. I stepped, expecting to sink, and did not. The surface held, not hard, but with the steadiness of a drum skin stretched dry. To my left the chimney boy did not step carefully enough, and went into his waist. He made a sound I have only ever heard again, on nights when foxes scream, and there are no foxes. His hands scrabbled for purchase. The water ate his medals, and left the holes they had made. We pulled him out by the hair. He came up without his eyebrows. He blinked at me like a newborn. "Did I drown?" he asked, as if he had heard the word in a story, and wanted to know how it tasted. I told him I did not think so yet. On the far bank hung a sack from a wire hook. The sack was thin as skin. You could see what was in it. It was not potatoes. The castigator cut it down with a private tenderness and set it in the mud. We stepped around it because even offerings learn courtesy. The second ditch contained bones, not as water, as themselves. They clicked and settled when we stepped, and made the music of jaw hinges and finger joints. Someone behind me began to mutter a multiplication table, the one from the chalkboard in the schoolhouse, and the bones counted along. A fog rolled in that smelled like hospitals after the bodies have been carried out. Linen, boiled chalk, a sweetness at the threshold of rot. It made the men in helm lift their scarf veils a little to breathe and look smaller. Here there were men in the trench waiting for us. Their helmets were shapes I had never seen before, high and back-swept, like the crests of fishes. Their collars were made of plates. They did not smile. They lifted their guns, and their guns were big enough that 2 of our boys could have hidden inside the barrels, if hiding had still been possible. The prophetess did not stop. She walked until the barrel of one of those guns touched the tip of her sword. Metal sang. Something among us began to laugh, the way a new mother laughs after the pain is over and the baby is not crying. The men in the trench did not fire. This is important. Remember it. They did not fire because the prophetess spoke the watchman's name. She did not say it loud. She did not need to. The name was already under their tongues, and when she gave it shape, their mouths made the shape because they could not help it. The name tasted of coin and of wet clay. It tasted of a riverbed turned over by machinery. I said it too, because I am a follower, and it set my teeth against each other, in a way no hunger ever had. The men in the trench stepped back, 1 pace only, like gentlemen making room for a widow. We went down the ladder and into the place where the maps ended. If you have never walked a trench that is not on any map, you can imagine it anyway. You have the pieces, Mud, wire, timber, sandbags, the breath of men, the breath of things that are no longer men. But here the timber is bone. Here the sandbags are old hymnals, with their pages glued shut by dew. Here the wire is hair braided, and braided, and braided again, until it holds a corner, as neatly as an anchor. Here the breath of men smells like the inside of cassocks, and the bottom of copper kettles. Here the breath of no longer men smells like the underside of stones when you lift them and find beetles. Clean, honest, but wrong. We walked bent, because the sky was low. We learned the steps, as we went. Left foot, right foot, breathe, swallow. Do not think of water that is not water. I came even with the prophetess, for a moment, because the trench narrowed, and the ranks bunched, and because the world made room for me, without asking permission. Isadora, I said, not knowing I meant to say it. What happens to us when we are through the gate? She did not look at me. Everything that ever happened to anyone, she said, all at once. Then we walk out the other side, and the mud is grass. And if we do not walk out, then we do not walk out. My anger surprised me. I had been living so long on thin gruel and thinner air. They told us in the yard that God favors the eager. He does, she said, and the bells answered, and she lifted the rusted sword to touch a charm nailed to a rib, and the charm tilted its head toward her, as if it could hear. He favors us with work. We came to the gate of ribs. You are thinking of butcher stalls and cathedrals and cages. You are thinking correctly, and not nearly enough. The gate was alive, not in the way of meat, in the way of rules. The rules of how bodies go together were still in there, humming. You could feel the hum in your molars. The lock was a skull wearing a crown. The crown was not a crown. It had teeth, and the teeth were the teeth of kings, and the skull was not a human skull, and not an animal's. It belonged to a story told so often, it had achieved the weight of bone. The prophetess took the lamb's tongue from her chest. She did not reach into her coat. She reached between her ribs. Believe me, or don't. When her fingers came out, they were holding a strip of pink meat, with a gold stud at the tip. She fed the lock with it. The skull chewed. The crown sighed. Behind us, the men in helm turned their faces away. The castigator made a neat little tick in his ledger, then stopped, then crossed it out, then very gently closed the ledger and held it like a warm loaf. The gate swung. The world on the other side was not hell. That is a mercy. It was only a trench, but it was the trench that had been dug under all other trenches. It was not wide. It was not deep. It was exactly as big as it needed to be to let through the number of us who had been counted, and no bigger. The smells were the same smells as outside, but arranged in a careful order, like alphabet letters, spelled into a word you had never thought to say. The word was not a good word. It was not a bad word. It was a necessary word. We heard them before we saw them. The heretics, you always hear them first. Their boots do not ring on boards. They make a sound like paper going damp. The prayers do not climb. They settle. Their laughter does not burst. It seeps. They were there, around the corner, and their guns were slung, and their fingers were poor at counting, because they spent so long making other people count. Isadora stepped, and her bells told them we were there. For a single heartbeat, the light trembled, as if a lung under a rib had held its breath. Then everything happened all at once, as promised. We charged. It is a simple sentence, but it contains a world. We charged with broom handles and bones, with kitchen knives and candlesticks, with the iron crosspieces of gates that no longer guarded anyone from anything. We charged with flags made of shroud linen, and we did not stop. when the linen tore. We wrapped the poles with the strips of our coats, and we did not stop when the coats tore. We wrapped them with our hair, and the hair did not tear, because it had been braided for exactly this. Bullets stitched at our knees, and bullets stitched at our shoulders, and bullets stitched across our mouths. One of the boys, one who had come from a town with a bell, kept time for us with the heel of his hand on an empty can. He struck, and struck, and struck, until his hand became his drum. A man ahead of me opened at the hip. It was not a moral lesson. It was physics. He kept walking. It is not true that everything inside us is chaos. It is tidy until it is not. The prophetess was singing. I cannot tell you the words. They were not a hymn I had learned. The men in plate fired, and we fell, and we rose, and we fell, and we rose. A woman next to me had her ear shot off, and continued to argue under her breath with a version of her mother. None of us could see. The chimney boy laughed a dry laugh when he realized he was still standing. Tears ran down his smooth brow and left clean lines. The man who had saved his name put his hand on my shoulder every time the trench lurched under our feet, and kept his fingers there long enough that I began to think of his hand as a buckle. We reached their line. It was not a line. It was a place where they had decided to stand. Their faces were not faces. I will not explain that further. The prophetess climbed onto a crate that had once held something viscous and very useful for something terrible. She raised her sword. The edge caught enough light to look honest for an instant. She opened her mouth to say the watchman's name again, or the gate's name, or God's, and a round went through her chest. She looked down at the hole, tilted her head to listen, said, very clearly, "Oh," then she kept speaking, because she was not finished. We went over them then. This was not a painting. This was a floor being scrubbed with red water. This was laundry on a line, in a wind that never stops. This was a choir, singing 3 different songs, and finding, by accident, a harmony. The ones who fled did not get far. The trench curved and handed them back. The ones who stood did not stand long. Their boots forgot the trick. The ones who knelt found nothing to pray into. When it broke, it did not break cleanly. We were not in their trench. We were not in ours. We were on a third path that had only opened because we insisted there must be a way through. It did not lead out into grass. It led into a square of ground, never trod by a living man. You could tell because the worms, when they found our boots, were surprised. The castigator took his cap off, very carefully as if born with it on. He closed his ledger, breathed. It may have been the first whole breath of his life. Something lifted me. That is the truest sentence I can make. Something took hold of my edges and smoothed them. My ribs were very clear, and my heart was not a throbbing meat thing anymore. It was a bell. I could hear it ringing. It rang from the first day my mother lay me in a basin and poured water over my head to call me into my name. It rang from the night I put my sister's red ribbon between my teeth so I would not make a noise when the men came to weigh my thoughts through my skull. It rang from the schoolyard chalk and the rain-blackened fence and the coins in the watchman's eyes. I lay down without meaning to, put my hands over the little band of medals, and read their shapes like braille. The lights went out, and then on and then out again, and then on, but each time they came back, they were not in the same place. I could hear, far away, the prophetess still speaking. The word she said over and over was forgiven. Then she said, found. Then she said, work. Then she said, rise. I rose. All the pain was still there, but arranged differently. It had been put into a cabinet and labeled, and the cabinet had been locked, but the key was in the lock, which means it was not prison, merely storage. I could see my hands with a clarity that made me feel I had been using the wrong hands, and had only now been issued the correct ones. They were not clean. They were not whole. They belonged to someone who had done work. Others were standing too, not many, enough to make a choir. The chimney boy without eyebrows, the woman without an ear, the man whose name he had saved. We looked at each other and saw the cabinets inside each other, the labels very neat, and the keys in all the locks. The castigator was on his knees, holding his ledger to his chest like a relic. Tears came out of him, the way sap comes out of a tree, slow but unstoppable. The prophetess was still upright. The hole in her chest was an eye. It was not accusing. It was not even looking. It was a way for the light to pass through her and show us that we were not the only things with cabinets and keys. Martyrs, she said. We did not ask who. Penitents, she said. We did not ask for what. Work, she said. And the bells on her sleeves did not ring, because when a forge is hot enough, iron knows what to do. We moved. The trench that is not on any map leads back to trenches that are on all maps. The rib gate did not close so much as forget itself. The watchmen counted differently, and so we were permitted to return to a world that still remembered the old arithmetic. When we emerged, daylight had learned how to be measured again. The soldiers at the bay who had watched us go were still there, but their faces were as if seen through glass, breathed upon, and wiped clean. One made the sign of the cross without caring who saw. One kissed his fingers in the old country manner. One reached for a radio and then did not. We went down their ladders as if we had always known the spacing of the rungs. Mud rose to our ankles and did not climb higher. A medic with a lamp looked into our faces, then shut the lamp with a click because it was not as bright as our eyes. We did not sing. We did not demand bread or medals or places at the mess. We did not give speeches. We did what we had been favored to do. We climbed the firing step and looked across no man's land. The wire glittered with frost, even though it was noon. The far parapet had the same shadow it had yesterday, proving there is a kind of faith that belongs to weather. Somewhere out there was another gate with another lock and another watchman. Somewhere out there were more offering yards and more ledgers and more boys without eyebrows. Somewhere out there, the water that is not water waited to swallow or not, depending on whether you stepped as if for a drum. Name, a soldier asked me, because names are the first things armies ask for, and the last things we forget. I told him. He shook his head. No, he said gently, your other name. I looked at the prophetess. She did not help me. That was not her job anymore. I looked at the castigator. He smiled without teeth, and set his ledger on the duckboards like an altar bread, and left it there. I said a name I had not known had been given to me. It fit my boots, and the line of my shoulders, and the cabinet, and the key. The medic nodded, as if closing a ledger on a full page. We held the trench. Holding is work more holy than taking. We bailed water that wanted to be more than water. We rebuilt a parapet out of sandbags that used to be hymnals. We laid duckboards like ribs, and walked them with the patience of carpenters. We cleaned the guns, even the guns that had stared at us without firing when the watchman's name was spoken. Metal remembers, the medic had said, and it does, and it is slow to forgive. The seamstress hands mended our torn sleeves with wire and flax in the same stitch, talking to the thread, as if it could learn a prayer. The chimney boy slept as people sleep the first night after a fever breaks, mouth open, creases smoothed. The surprise gone for a while. In the afternoon, a runner brought us a pot of something that had started as soup and ended as a lesson in gratitude. We ate it from the same rim, and I tasted on the tin the ghosts of other mouths, and did not mind. We buried what could be buried. There are places where the ground will not take anything else. There we stacked the bodies like cordwood and crossed ourselves over the neatness of it. There was a heretic among them who was younger than any of us had expected youth could be under their helmets. His face was not a face, and yet I saw the echo of boyhood in the grisly arrangement. The castigator put his cap back on to tip it, which is to say he found a way to shape respect out of an old habit. When evening came, a thin rain fell that was too clean for this place and made the trench smell for an hour like the hallway of a school with all the children at home. Night in a trench, after work, is a longer thing than night in a trench before work. Then you are an outline. Now you have weight. The prophetess sat with her back to the traverse, and her eyes half closed. The eye in her chest, if that is the right word, had shrunk from a coin to a button to a stitch hole. She spoke very little. When she did, it was to say a name, and someone, somewhere on the line, would answer yes, without knowing why. The castigator had found a square of planking for a table, with care that made his hands shake, lifted the ledger onto it, and opened it to the first page. He took out a pencil, looked at it, set it down, looked at us. "If I begin again," he said, in a voice he did not recognize, "I will not be able to stop, and if I do not begin again, I will not know how to stop." We told him he did not need to choose. He laughed once, softly, then covered the ledger with a slice of bread, as if declaring the page consecrated, and closed it. The second night, the chapel returned to me in a dream. I stood in the same doorway, with the soot handprint. The candle deltas were the same, only reversed, as if the river were flowing uphill. In the dream my hand fit the small print exactly, and warmth moved up my arm, and paused at the elbow, waiting for permission. I woke with the taste of soot under my tongue, and the knowledge, not belief, knowledge that the child who had made the mark had not died until someone came and fit the shape. I did not know whether I had fit it or would. Time is a pocket with a hole in it here. You put something in, and later find it again somewhere else. On the third morning, a flare rose from the enemy side, white, then red, then a color with all colors in it. We saw the shadows it made and recognized the shapes. Helmets like fish crests, plate collars, prayer rags hung wrong. We did not name them. We did not have to. The prophetess stood. The bells on her sleeve were still, but I could hear them anyway. It was the sound your teeth make when you admit the truth to them. "Work," she said, and the word no longer meant what it had meant in the yard. We went over the top, not in a rush, not in a ragged line. We went the way a loom frame tilts forward into the next row, steady and inevitable. The wire did what wire does. The guns did what guns do. The sky did not fall, which is always a mercy. The second gate was not a gate. It was a habit of earth. We recognized it, the way you recognize a man who wore a beard when you knew him and now does not. The eyes first, then the mouth. We found the watchman's coins in the faces of the men aiming at us, their irises bright like minted things, and spoke the name again without a mouth. And for a heartbeat, not long, not even holy, only exact, their fingers forgot the trick of pulling. The chimney boy stumbled, and his drum hand splayed uselessly against a board. I caught his elbow. The woman, without an ear, looped a strand of hair twice around her wrist, and pulled a sandbag up to make a step for the rest of us. I will never not see how capable her hands looked, how much like prayer a useful thing can be. The man whose name he had saved told it to me in the hollow under the parapet while we waited on a breath in the guns. It was a good name. I will not write it. He has a child somewhere who should hear it first. We took little ground and held it exactly as long as the numbers permitted. In the holding I learned my new name better. It sits lower in the throat. It is heavier at the end. It opens the jaw where the other closes the lips. Once when the prophetess passed me, her sleeve brushed my sleeve, and I felt every scar on her forearm like a script under my skin. "Do you hear them?" I asked, meaning the saint's boots she had promised. "Yes," she said, "and also the chains they are choosing not to drag." She looked smaller. The stitch hole in her chest had shrunk to the size of a seed. "Why are we permitted?" I asked, a question too large for the space between two shots. "Because we are not asking for permission," she said, and smiled the first human smile I had seen on her. Crooked, tired, undecorated. We are doing the work and letting God catch up. When night pressed, the lamps showed only the strip of ground where our boots had the right to be. In the shelter of a traverse, I found a little book wrapped in oilcloth and tucked in a notch between sandbags that had once been psalms and were now only weather. It was not scripture. It was a ledger like the castigators, but made of a child's copybook. The pages were filled with the same words in a small hand practiced beyond its years. "I am here. I am here. I am here." I tore out one page, only one, and tucked it under my medals without reading the rest. I do not know if that was theft or liturgy. There was a lull small enough to step over. We stepped over it and found a dugout where candles had burned down into their own wax so neatly that the wicks lay on the surface like signposts. A kettle sat on a crate with a little skirt of soot around its feet. A spoon lay on the duckboard with one drop of soup at the bottom of it, round as a lens. I saw myself in it again, the roped face, the borrowed hands, and then I saw behind me a child's fingers too small for work. I turned, but there was only air. "If you are here," I said to the air. I was late. The air answered by not moving, which is how forgiveness sometimes arrives. In the small hours, I slept the sleep of someone who will be woken. I dreamed the soot handprint again, and this time when I set my palm into it, a second hand, larger than both, pressed over mine. The pressure ran up my bones and set them to humming the rule song the ribgate had hummed. I woke with my teeth aching, the honest ache you get after biting something too cold, and heard, far away along the line, a choir that no one else heard. It was not beautiful. It was correct. The chimney boy murmured something about ladders. The seamstress counted knots. The castigator muttered a prayer with no verbs in it. At dawn we prepared to give back what we had kept. The prophetess said, "We will not keep it by gripping. We will keep it by making it into something else, where we set it down." The medic with the lamp taught us a new stitch for sandbag mouths, and said he had learned it mending chasubles, and laughed at himself, and then did not laugh. A runner brought the rumor that heretic submarines had been seen in the black water off a coast we would never see, that demons had learned to count by the tide, that the church had a machine that could look at your breath and know how long you had left. We shrugged the way men shrug when all rumors are true and useless. We returned to the chapel because you must return to beginnings, even if you only walk past them. The soot handprint was there, and the cup, and the bell carcass in its nettle. The child was not there in body. The prophetess touched the wall above the mark and said a name not to the air, but to the stone, and the stone made a little sound like a throat clearing. We left a crust of bread at the door on the way out, and it did not mold. The castigator picked up his switch where he had left it 2 days and a century before, weighed it, and laid it across the threshold like a bridge. For coming back, he said. On the 5th day, the watchman's name ran down the trench line again like wind. No one shouted it. The lips of men moved without sound. We stood, lifted our hands, and did not ask for orders. We went forward. If I tell you that we walked out into grass, I am lying. If I tell you there were blades that bent and sprang back, I am close enough to keep my soul. We kept the new trench for as long as the numbers permitted. Then we gave it back to the mud with thanks. We packed our cabinets and shut them, and the keys remained. There are things I am not telling because they are too small, which is to say, they matter more than anything, and cannot be put here because the page would flame. The way the seamstress threaded a needle in the wind on the 2nd morning, with her eyes closed. The way the chimney boy kissed the saint's medal on his collar for warmth, and then looked surprised when it worked. The way the man who had saved his name wrote it in the steam of his breath, and then laughed to see it unmake itself at once. There are things I cannot tell because they belong to someone else's ledger. There are things I do not tell because I prefer that God discovers them first. We are pilgrims, still, but not offerings. We are the part of the prayer, said with the mouth closed. We are the march. We are not saints. We are their work made visible. When I sleep, I dream of the rib gate, not as horror, but as hinge. When I wake, my teeth set like nails, and my hands like hammers, and the day folds over its pin and holds. If you pass the chapel, you will find the soot handprint, and beside it, one the size of my palm, pressed newer and darker. And if you press your hand there, your hand will not fit, but the warmth will run up your arm anyway and wait at the elbow. If you speak the watchman's name under your tongue, you will taste coin and wet clay and the riverbed turned by machines, and you will understand why some locks must be fed. If you raise a bread slice over an empty page, that page will learn patience. If you cut down a sack hung on a wire hook and step around it, you will remember what we remembered, that courtesy is a weapon and a prayer, both. So we move as looms move, row into row, steady and inevitable. The sky has still not fallen. That is mercy enough to make a day. Somewhere ahead, a gate we have not seen will ask us a question we already answered with our feet. Somewhere behind, a ledger is growing a crust. Somewhere to the side, a child is pressing a small hand into soot, waiting for the future to fit. If you see us, do not look away, because you were told to. Lift your hat. If you must, better, lift your hands. The work favors the eager. God will catch up.